Good afternoon, everyone. It's that time again where for the City of Grand Forks Virtual News Conference. Thank you for bearing with us on the schedule change as we are now going Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. The governor is now going Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so it's a stagger there. So I know there for a while as media members, you guys were running between news conferences pretty quick, back and forth. So we are going to go Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2:15. And as we get started today, as always, we'll start with Mayor Brown.
Well, thank you, everyone. Today's Grand Forks Virtual News Conference, Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. On today's panel, we'll have Dr. Josh Deere, Director of Primary Care, Altru Health System, Dr. Terry Brenner, Superintendent of Grand Forks Public Schools, and Garth Ridland, President and CEO of Valley Senior Living. So good afternoon, and thank you for staying informed. As you may have heard, late last night, we were notified that a firefighter with the Grand Forks Fire Department tested positive for COVID-19. In line with all city departments and recommendations enacted by the city, we had already put physical distancing and disinfecting practices in place to help minimize interactions between our shifts to help keep our fire operators safe. The two other firefighters who work closely with the individual are under a 14-day quarantine, and fire station number 5 is being professionally sanitized and disinfected. We are flexible and adaptable and have shifted crews around to continue providing first responder service to the citizens of Grand Forks. Thank you to Fire Chief Gary Lorenz for your swift action and leadership in handling this situation. We have Chief Lorenz on today during our question and answer segment. This is a reminder to all that Grand Forks' greatest assets are its people, especially those that are on the front lines providing essential services. Their health and well-being has a direct impact on our ability to provide effective and efficient services, and we continue making their health and safety the highest priority. This is one of the reasons we have decided to postpone Curbside Cleanup Week. Cleanup Week is an all-hands-on-deck operation where public works crews, which includes streets, sanitation, and central garage crews, and waterworks crews, which includes drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater crews, are intermingled and working together to provide this service. Merging crews would put our employees at a greater risk and cause a larger disruption to our central operations if something unfortunate were to happen. Because we've had to postpone curbside cleanup, we are opening the landfill for free drop-offs for Grand Forks citizens between Saturday, May 9th and Saturday, May 16th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The landfill will be closed Sunday, May 10th. We continue to coordinate with East Grand Forks, and we will have information to you moving forward on a curbside cleanup week in the coming weeks. Next, we're in our first week of GF Smart Restart, and I want to thank all our local businesses for taking this seriously and following the standards and guidelines. They're making tough decisions by ensuring the health and safety of their employees and customers, all the while making sure their businesses remain profitable. Remember, opening your business is voluntary, not mandatory. I encourage you to do what is best for the safety of your employees and customers. If that means limiting hours, limiting occupancy, or limiting service, we fully support you in those decisions. Consumer confidence is essential. Market forces will drive people to the places where they have confidence and safety practices. I encourage the citizens of Grand Forks to support local businesses in the way that they feel is safe, whether that be through takeout, curbside pickup, delivery, or on-site. Businesses and consumers alike have the responsibility to continue practicing physical distance, washing hands, wearing face coverings, as well as following the new protocols. Our collective commitment to public health is critical to supporting our economy. As part of the GF Smart Restart, we have a variety of resources for businesses, like signage and links to the standards and guidelines at grandforksgov.com/GF Smart Restart. The high responsibility that's been placed on individuals and businesses throughout the situation has just gotten higher. We have already seen our local businesses answer the call. Throughout this GF Smart Restart, the health and safety of our most vulnerable populations is our highest priority. Long-term care facilities in Grand Forks are continuing strong measures to keep their residents safe. And we're happy to have Garth Ridland from Valley Senior Living with us today to talk about the safeguards they have in place. Thank you, everyone, for doing your part for a GF Smart Restart. Now we'll go to Dr. Josh Deere, Director of Primary Care, Altru Health System. Welcome, Dr. Deere.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Josh Deere, Medical Director of Primary Care at Altru. Thanks again for the opportunity to join you all today. I'll be brief today, as I know we have several panelists with updates to share. I want to remind the community that Altru continues to be available for testing and ask that you call our screening hotline or visit our sick clinic. You can find more details at altru.org/coronavirus. We remain prepared to care for patients in our hospital. As of today, we have 7 patients receiving care related to COVID-19 in the hospital setting. We're also here for safe care for all patients. Please do not postpone important appointments or ignore signs and symptoms. Maintaining your overall health is more important now than ever. Thanks again for this opportunity to share with our local media partners. Please continue to stay safe and practice good habits as you start to enjoy our local businesses again.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Brenner.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you again for the opportunity to represent both school districts in Grand Forks and at the Grand Forks Air Force Base. We have 16 days of distance learning remaining on our calendar. As most of you have heard by now, the governor extended his executive order for distance learning to continue through the rest of the school year. For some school districts, that means May 15th is their final day. Many of our bedroom communities surrounding Grand Forks and their school year, they start their school year a little bit sooner, end their school year sooner than we do. We will continue on through May 28th, which would be our final day of instruction. And then we wrap up on May 29th with clerical day for teachers. I'd like everybody to know that to circle on their calendar that May 31st is graduation date. That date stays on the calendar as is. It will be a modified graduation. We'll follow the guidelines set forth by the state, by public health, by the governor, by our city leaders, Mayor Brown, and it will likely be something other than the traditional graduation. Our high school principals and assistant superintendent have been working on a plan that has to do with cars and a parade, but would also have some multimedia inserts so we can have students speaking and some other acknowledgements that can be integrated into the overall experience. More details are forthcoming, but I think it's just important for our families to know, our seniors, and in particular our parents of our seniors, for planning purposes, that May 31st will be the graduation date for our high school seniors this year. We know it won't be like all traditional graduations, but we're living in a different world and a different environment, and we're going to do the best we can to acknowledge the work that our 17, 18, and 19-year-old kids have done, or I should say young adults have done. Other than that, just a couple of quick trivia things for everybody who's listening. Last Friday was National Principals Day, and what a better way to honor our principals than the leadership that they've exhibited through this COVID-19 experience. They've been outstanding, they've been remarkable, and they've stuck to it every single day. And today is actually Teacher Appreciation Day, and the full week is Teacher Appreciation Week. So parents, community members, if you're listening out there, if you've had a wonderful experience with one or many of our teachers in the past, present, feel free to jot them a note. It can be sent electronically. And please acknowledge the work that they're doing in this extremely difficult environment. But they are doing a fantastic and incredible job. Also, Wednesday of this week is National School Nurses Day. So I get a little medical piece in here for Dr. Deere and Dr. Brown. And we want to recognize and honor the fantastic work that our nurses have done. As far as planning for school reopening, I've mentioned here before that we're planning for multiple situations and scenarios based on the governor's executive orders, based on public health, the city, and the direction of the mayor. And we want to make sure that we are smart in how we restart. It could be something as simple as everything is back to normal at the end of August. But knowing that some of the restrictions have been lifted in our city and in our state, there could be the likelihood that we see another surge, and we have to be really smart about how we restart. So there could be a soft opening. It could be a blended opportunity of half days in the building with students and staff, and the other half of the day could be distance learning. Those are just a couple of options, and there are other scenarios that we're working on as well. We want to keep our children, we want to keep our young adults, and we want to keep our staff and families safe during this unprecedented time. Other than that, I will stay on the line for questions at the end. And again, thank you for this opportunity to share an update.
Thank you, Dr. Brenner. And now Garth Ridland, President and CEO of Valley Senior Living. Welcome, Mr. Ridland.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Thank you, Dr. Brenner, for the reminder. I have a teacher in my household that actually teaches seniors. I deal with a totally different group of seniors. But thanks for the reminder on that. everybody that we were talking with last week in healthcare, whether it was people at the hospital, the clinics, my peers across the state, we've been really concerned about what happens if Smart Restart isn't done in the right way. And I think I have a great story to tell here at Valley. We've been very transparent about what's happening here at Valley, and to the point where I feel like we have a story to tell to the business community and to everybody who lives here. And I'm going to just recap what happened last week here at Valley. Last Sunday and Monday, we had a unique opportunity and something that every long-term care community in the world would absolutely give anything for. We had the opportunity to be mass tested across the entire group of employees and residents of all of our care facilities. So we tested about 1,250 people in all between Sunday and Monday with our staff. At that, we all signed pledges as to how we would operate inside of work and outside of work. We collected the household connections of all of our employees, and we downloaded the Care app, Care19 app for our phones. We made it more than just a mass testing event. When the lab started to process those tests on Monday, I think we occupied about 30 straight hours of sorry if I went out for a second there. The lab took about 30 straight hours to process all of our results. Again, 1,250 of them. Through the halfway point, we had gotten 4 positives. Through that, 4 of our staff were found positive. All 4 were asymptomatic. I called the first person at 11:30 at night, who was completely shocked to find out that that person had COVID-19. Asymptomatic, spouse is asymptomatic. It was a complete surprise. And that was what we kept finding as we were calling people. To date, we have 7 total staff that have tested positive for COVID-19, and they work in 5 completely distinct areas within our communities. And of the 2 that work in a community where there's 2 people, they work on different shifts, so they don't really even see each other. So what can we conclude from that, from all of those tests? We can conclude that our staff are doing a fantastic job of social distancing, of hand hygiene. They're working closely with their residents and each other, and they're doing a fantastic job of doing the best that they possibly can. But what we have found out through collecting household information is that 6 of the 7 people have a connection. And while it isn't a physical connection, it is a connection to the community. And it is a connection to businesses that have remained open during this period of time where many businesses have shut down. And I will say that we've had 3 different businesses that we have connections to outbreaks within the community, that our staff, all they do is they go home to somebody who also works in the community in one of these 3 businesses. And none of us social distance in our own home. If we're going to make it through this pandemic, we can social distance outside of our homes and at our workplaces, but we can't social distance within our homes. And so what we're finding is that it is that time in the business community that the household members are spending right now. And it's directly linked to our staff. It's asymptomatic transfer to an asymptomatic carrier. And then that person is now working with our seniors and our residents here in long-term care. And this does have an impact, obviously, on the residents. When we had all the residents tests processed, at the end of the day, we had 5 of our residents who were asymptomatically identified with COVID-19. And when I've been talking with people at the Department of Health, at the state, yes, we wear surgical masks. Yes, we wash our hands very frequently. Surgical masks are not 100% effective against this, and there are not enough N95 masks for all of healthcare to wear. So there will be some level of transmission from staff to residents, despite our best efforts. And it's just devastating to find that out. We were all on a call together when we found out about the first 2 residents. And it's been very challenging to have this knowledge that at the time in which we're all doing our very best and we're all sheltering in place, we can have residents that are affected by COVID-19. And I guess the lesson that we're learning here is that we are all connected. And I just want you to all think about how it is that you interact within your workplace. And for those of you who are business leaders that would be watching this, when you reopen your businesses, no matter what screening process you put in place, you will have asymptomatic people who are in your business as customers, and there will be asymptomatic people who are working for you, and they have that potential to spread that. And our people of our community need to be protected within their workplaces, so that they can go home and spend that time in their household and not have to social distance for the next 2-3 years in this, or 2 years or a year and a half in this pandemic. I guess I just plead with the business community, with people who are frequenting these businesses and are so excited to see them open up again. You know, we need to do our best to continue to social distance. We need to do great hand hygiene. But if you're an employer, you really have to be able to enforce the rules with the staff. It isn't enough to be able to provide them that personal protective equipment. It isn't enough to provide them that safe environment. If they're deviating from that, there has to be some kind of a consequence. And because neither you nor we in healthcare can afford to have people breaking that chain. One comment, and I'm going to be very clear that I'm not going to speak to the condition of any of the 12 people that have been infected over the course of this pandemic at Valley. And I'm not going to comment on the names of the 3 businesses that we have connections to. And I'm going to tell you why, because first of all, from an employee and resident standpoint, there's HIPAA that governs that. But from a business standpoint, why am I not saying the business names? It's because if we demonize the businesses that reach out to public health, it's going to push that underground. And when you suspect something that happens in your business, you need to reach out and contact your public health. They can help identify. They can help identify the need for contact tracing. They can help identify the need for some testing, and they'll be your resource. And it's going to be very uncomfortable if this happens to you, despite your best efforts. But you need to lean into it, and you need to really embrace it, because there are immunocompromised people. There are healthcare workers that everybody is going home to at the end of the night, and in turn, we're going to care for people that next day. So, I think our staff at Valley Senior Living are heroes. I think that we can all be heroes when it comes to what we can do to slow the spread and to stop COVID-19 to the best extent possible as we reopen business and society. And with that, I'll pause and turn it over to Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Ridley. Thank you for that update. Now we're going to John Bernstein for our Q&A portion of our virtual news conference. John?
Thank you, Mayor Brown. And also for part of Q&A, just want everyone to be aware, as Mayor mentioned, we have Gary Lorenz, Grand Forks Fire Chief, available for questions. We have Deb Swanson from Grand Forks Public Health available for questions. And Mr. Todd Phelan is on the line as well. So our first question will go to first hand that was raised, Mr. Joe Bowen.
Hey there. So the Grand Forks firefighter who tested positive for COVID-19, where and how was he infected, as far as you guys know?
Chief Lorenz, I just gave you power to unmute your mic, and go ahead.
We do not have a definitive answer on that right now. It's been turned over to the health department and the contact tracing, and it's currently under investigation.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Chris Larson from the Flag.
Thank you, John. My question is for Garth. Garth, when you started telling people, what's been the reaction from your residents? How are they handling things right now?
Thanks, Chris. Our residents are in pretty good spirits. They understand that we're doing absolutely everything possible. Overall spirits are kind of tough because we've been doing 2 months of no visitation. And, you know, as much as a phone call and a FaceTime visit is amazing, a lot of our residents have a lot of loneliness at this point. And so we need to be really successful on this restart of our society. The sooner we can successfully get this under control, the sooner they're going to be able to see their loved ones in person and hold them.
Thank you, Garth. The next question from Mr. Matt Henson from WDAY.
This is for Chief Lorenz. Chief, how will this impact response times having to come from stations 1 and 3 to get to the Station 5 district?
Chief Lorenz? Chief, you're still muted here. Let me unmute you. Go ahead, Chief.
Okay, thank you. It is going to affect response times down in that far southeast area of the city for a short time. Stations 1 and 3 will be the primary into that area. Obviously, as I've said before, quickness in our response is everything, but I feel that this is a necessary temporary situation to disinfect that station and do everything we can to protect our workforce. I have learned that our professional, we're going to have the decontamination starting tomorrow. So I'm hoping by tomorrow evening, Wednesday at the latest, we have that station back open and running. But to answer your question directly, Matt, it does affect it slightly, not greatly, because if everybody remembers, those were the 2 primary stations for that area prior to 2016 when that station opened. However, the city has since grown even a little farther south since that time. But I believe that this is a thing that necessarily needs to be done for a very short amount of time.
Thank you, Chief. Next question coming from KNOX.
My question is for Deb Swanson. Deb, the last time that you were with us on a press conference, you mentioned that the health department had other tools that you could use to ensure that we cooperate with a contact tracing investigation. Vern Dosh at the State Department of Health tells me that if we refuse to cooperate, the process is over, and he disagreed with that interpretation. What other tools do you have to force us to cooperate with a contact investigation?
Hi, Ryan. I think that there's probably been a little bit of confusion here, and some of that may have even been on my part relative to the topics of contact tracing, the Care19 app, and then what we do to contain things if we have people who are ordered into isolation because they are actually infectious. Those are 3 completely different topics, and there may have been some attempt to perhaps respond to one question and giving an answer to another. So I'll talk about what happens with Grand Forks Public Health Department and our personnel. We are responsible to help the North Dakota Department of Health with case investigation, and that includes contact tracing. And those personnel are oftentimes the first people providing test results to individuals. So they work on developing a trusting relationship because they're providing confidential health information, and they're providing information on health and safety, as well as including the need to isolate if they have a positive test. So we ask individuals who they've been in touch with, who they've been in contact with, and there's a definition for that. And that's usually individuals who are in their household or their work or their school. They help us identify anybody who's at risk of disease. And this information is elicited just to protect the entire community. So to date, the individuals that we have been working with, that we have provided information to them on a positive test result, they've been very cooperative. It's usually very easy to get information from individuals because they're concerned about their close contacts and people that they want to protect. So that's my answer to tools. It's motivational interviewing. It's developing those trusting relationships, ensuring that we have the best interests of their health and safety, as well as the health and safety of the community in mind when we are speaking with individuals. It is true that we cannot force people to provide all that information, but I think we live in a society where people want to help out others. And so those are the things that we employ. I think it was alluded to that the CARE app, CARE19 app that was developed by the state has some relationship to this. And while that app was developed by the state, it's not required for people. It is recommended though for everyone, even if you have not tested positive, because it will help you identify where you've been. So if for some reason you are asymptomatic and you get tested and you find out that you do have a positive test, the CARE app might be able to tell you where you've been, if you've been to the grocery store or if you've been at a friend's house, because you can log that in. But it is by no means required. Our staff have received information on it. The app has been improved and individuals are encouraged to use it if they so choose, but it's certainly not required. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Deb. Next question from Mr. Neil Carlson from iNews.
My question is for Garth. As we're finding out today, more and more nursing homes around the region are finding themselves in the same position as you. And depending on whose study you want to listen to, well, maybe this will last for 2 years. Are you guys looking at any new procedures that would allow people access to visit their loved ones?
We talk about it every day, Neil. Thanks for the question. We do window visits, which of course isn't the same, because you're on the other side of that window of that room. Not everybody has a window that faces the exterior of a building. We do Zoom, we do FaceTime, obviously the phone. But in a statewide call last week with the Department of Health, it is very clear that from CMS's perspective, we're not at a point yet where we're going to be able to allow the public and family members into the nursing home. And in fact, we've been directed that if people leave with their families, that they're basically discharged from that nursing home. And it's such a difficult time. I spoke with a family member at length over the weekend, and there's loneliness and there's a toll that takes as well. And it's very concerning. That's why we're hoping that this restart can be successful. I know in the nation's plan, the last portion of that plan is to really reopen nursing homes. The rest of it has to go well first. So we're hoping for success across the board here.
Thank you, Garth. Next question comes from online, and this is for Dr. Josh Deere. Dr. Deere, could you talk a little bit about the testing procedures at Altru? And if a individual shows up with symptoms, are they potentially guaranteed to get a test, or are they still evaluated?
Yeah, at this time, we are testing anyone with symptoms. We're following North Dakota Department of Health guidelines. We have done a total of 2,900 total tests. We have an 84 test pending. We have 728 available for community testing. So if you call our hotline, if you're seen by us and there's a recommendation or need for testing, we're going to test you as a community member and patient.
Thank you, Dr. Deere. Next question, Mr. Joe Bowen.
Is there a plan, maybe the city or state health department or wherever, to do any sort of targeted testing at the fire department?
Thinking where this would be directed, either Chief Lorenz or Deb Swanson with Grand Forks Public Health. Has this been addressed to this point?
Was the question if we have a plan to target test the fire department? Is that the question, Mr. Bowen?
Yes. Is there a plan at the city level, the state level, wherever, to do targeted testing at the Grand Forks Fire Department?
We haven't explored that yet. However, when we did a large mass event, we did test first responders. We invited them to attend. I understand a number of fire department personnel have been tested, as well as police department personnel and first responders throughout Grand Forks. I'm not aware that we would plan to do that based on one individual case. It's generally not recommended to do that for just one case in a business place. But if we saw a cluster or we saw illness, that might be reconsidered. But if we do another community event and the resources are there, that would be a possibility. I don't think we would recommend it right at this time.
Thank you, Deb. Next question from Mr. Matt Henson, WDAY.
Yes, this is probably for Deb in regards to contact tracing. The fact that this was
Matt, we're going to come back to you because we're losing your audio
responder,
feed
where do you go from here?
Hey, excuse me, Matt, we lost your audio feed there. We'll go to Chris Larson.
Thanks, John. My question for Deb Swanson. Deb, I contacted you either Friday or Saturday in regards to a case over at Taco Bell in Grand Forks. Is there any updates on that at this time?
I don't have any further information on that particular situation at this time. It's my understanding that contact tracing has begun.
So the investigation is still underway or still ongoing, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Thank you, Chris. Next question, KNOX.
Question for Dr. Deer. 7 patients at Altru with COVID-19 right now. Last week it was 8, so that number's remained rather stable. I know the new metric is number of beds, number of ICU units available. We're still in pretty fantastic shape. Can you just give us a general comment on where we're at with capacity?
Yeah, I think you're accurate on your capacity statement. We do only have 7, so we're down from last week. And we feel confident with our plan and our surge plans that even if we were to have a spike, that we'd be able to safely care for our community. I agree that we'll continue to monitor our inpatients that are COVID positive. And if that number starts to trend down, that's obviously a good thing for us as a health system and our community as a whole.
Thank you, Dr. Deer. Matt Henson, let's take another shot at this.
All right, hopefully you can hear me now. Question for Deb Swanson. 2, actually. 1 should be real quick. I'm assuming that no first responders tested positive at the mass test event, since this is the first case we're hearing about. And my question I was trying to ask last time, the fact that we have a first responder who tested positive now, does that change the way you do any type of contact tracing? Does it speed it up, or is there more of a concern?
I'll take the second question first. It would remain the same. We don't change anything about that, basically because it's been a first responder that I'm aware of, but I'm not on the front lines of the contact tracing. And your first question was related to, can you repeat it for me, please?
I can have that, Deb. It was at our mass testing event a week and a half ago, and first responders test positive there.
Thank you. I do not know the answer to that question. That would have been reported back to the individuals who would have reported to their employers, and contact tracing would have begun at that point. If there were any recommendations for the workplace, those would have been worked out with the individuals that were working with the cases.
Thank you, Deb. Next question here from Pam Knutson. Pam, hold on. I'm going to go ahead.
Hi, this question is for Dr. Deer. I was wondering, of the 7 patients who are hospitalized at Altru, how many of them are in your intensive care unit, or are you at liberty to say?
Yeah, that's due to patient privacy. We can't speak on specifics as to how many patients are in the ICU and those that aren't. So we can't say due to HIPAA.
Thank you, Dr. Deer. Mr. Chris Larson.
Question for Dr. Brenner. I know the governor has closed things to distant learning for the rest of the year. Any talk on summer school at this point?
Yeah, we're planning multiple scenarios for summer school. The way it stands as of today, our 9th through 12th graders will be involved with distance learning because those students are either fast tracking their academic pathway or they're in credit recovery. So that'll happen in the month of June and the first week of July for grades 9 through 12. Middle school and elementary, we're deferring until August with the plan, with the hopes that we'd be in a face-to-face scenario. And the second piece of that is it's simply closer to the start date for some remediation and for some academic recovery. So that's the plan as it stands today, Chris.
Thank you, Dr. Brenner. We have time for two more. Mr. Joe Bowen.
Hey there. So Terry, when we spoke over email last week, you're saying the school district has not triangulated the data between families who've been issued internet hotspots and the attendance rates of their children. At least that's kind of how I understood what you said there. Why is that the case? Why have you guys not done that? It seems like it'd be a pretty good way to measure whether or not that plan is working.
Well, it might be a good way to measure, but it's a time-consuming way to measure. What we have in place, Joe, to answer your question specifically, is we've issued 228 hotspots, and if there's a lack of engagement, we do have a team of people who are reaching out to that family, both virtually and going to the door if possible. But again, I don't have that data for you that you've been seeking, but I can say anybody who has been disengaged in the process has been contacted by the school district.
Mr. Matt Henson.
This question is probably for Chief Lorenz, following up on Deb Swanson's response. So, to get it correct, first responders are not they're not obligated to say that they tested positive, and if that's the case, why did you choose then to come forward and be transparent about it?
And Chief Lorenz, go ahead.
To clarify, I'm not sure that was what Deb said there. They would have notified me, and to clarify, and I can only speak for the fire department, I was not contacted by anyone that was tested positive during that event. The individuals are required to come forward if they test positive, and there was none during that event. And so this was the first case for the fire department. As far as an exact number of how many tested, that I do not know because it was voluntary.
And to follow up on that one a little bit, Mr. Henson, Chief Lorenz and I had a conversation. Part of the reason for the transparency and the release is it did result in the closure of a fire station for a short time. So a bit of a change in service. So we wanted to be transparent on that. And a final question. I'm sorry, just one more for Dr. Deer. Dr. Deer, do you have any numbers as far as beds available at Altru at this time, as far as a occupancy standpoint?
Yeah, that's really difficult to answer. We do have capacity right now. Our surge plan really escalates our bed count up for both COVID positive patients and just our general population. And from a staffing and space perspective, we feel very comfortable with where we're at today.
Thank you, Dr. Deer. That was a question from the city Facebook page. Thank you to the media for your questions. That wraps that up. And thank you to our panelists, as we do every time. We will wrap it up with Mayor Brown.
Remember to continue following CDC guidelines and recommendations. Practice physical distancing, wear a face covering when in public settings, and sanitizing frequently used surfaces. Continue to support local businesses in a way that you feel safe. This will be a marathon, not a sprint. Stay vigilant, stay cautious, slow the spread, save lives. We're in this together, we'll get through this together, and together we'll emerge stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown, and hope everyone has a good afternoon.